everybody. Let me start with a quick show of hands. Before this panel today, who had heard of Aufschrei? Okay, we got a couple. How about Kenyans on Twitter or someone tell CNN? Okay, again, sort of a smattering. I'm going to go out on a limb and argue that this is one of the better rooms in the world as far as people who are knowledgeable about social media and social change. And so it's a wonderful thing that PDF is bringing unfamiliar people to the stage, talking about topics that we don't get to talk about every day. But there's something to worry about in all of this, because this was a moment in time at which we were supposed to have access to ideas and information from anywhere in the world. The whole idea, or at least some people's whole idea behind this connectivity, was that it costs almost nothing to publish information, and that it's possible to access information from anybody in the world at pretty much any time. And what's happening instead is we may not be getting a broader view of the world. We may actually be getting something of a narrower one. And we try to make the case for you. If we look at mainstream news coverage in the US, we've actually had an incredible refocusing away from international news since the Vietnam era. We sort of peaked during Vietnam as far as how much attention we were spending on the rest of the world. And even through the Gulf War and even through the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, we have shrunk about 3 times in terms of how much attention we're paying to the rest of the world when we look at the news hole on broadcast television. So the good news, of course, is that the internet has infinite space. We can put up as much content as we want. Maybe things are getting better in a digital age. And the answer is no, not so much. Here's what the world looks like as seen by the New York Times. The New York Times reaches about 18 million people a month online. Here's what it looks like from the Huffington Post, which reaches about 80 million online. You may notice that a lot of the developing world starts falling off that map and starts dimming down. By the way, this is not a knock on HuffPo. HuffPo actually tries to do a really good job in international coverage. But in general, when we look into digital media tends to have an extremely strong local bias. Here's what happens when we start looking at Twitter. This is a great paper out from a couple of folks at the University of Illinois. And you might be able to see on the map, the white dots are where people are tweeting. And the red dots are where we're hearing about places through Google News. So if you see an area that's mostly white, this is a place that's getting a lot of social media exposure. If you see a place that's all red, this is a place that we're hearing about mostly through mainstream media. And remember, mainstream media is giving us less and less of the international as we go. Now here's what's really weird about this. If you talk to any economist, they're going to tell you that we're going through a period of globalization. We're increasingly dependent on other parts of the world for the stuff that we buy, for the people that we work with. We're integrating our supply chains. If you talk to an environmentalist, they're going to tell you that taking on the big challenges of our time is not just about electric vehicles or not just about solar power in the United States. It's about helping China and India figure out how to get a hold of their environmental problems while still lifting people out of poverty. You talk to an epidemiologist, and they're going to tell you that the diseases that we're really worried about today are coming out of Central Africa or they're coming out of Asia. And they're hitchhiking on these infrastructures of globalization that we've been building, particularly the air transport routes, as you may remember from the SARS crisis. The truth is we're getting very good at globalizing almost everything, and we're really lousy at globalizing attention. So I want to offer 2 thoughts on this. And the first thought that I'm going to toss out there is that this is not your fault. Or it's not completely your fault. It's sort of all of our faults, but it's not your fault personally. And then the second thought, which is maybe the harder one to get across, is that I think we can actually do something about this. So first on the idea that this is not your fault. Sociology has a very helpful concept called homophily. And homophily is basically a very fancy way of saying that birds of a feather flock together. This is one of the most fundamental human traits. You can explain enormous amounts of human behavior in terms of people looking for others who are demographically or psychographically similar. We go into a room full of people, we unconsciously seek out people who are like us. And the interesting thing is that we can overcome this. We know how to do this if we decide we want to force diversity. And so PDF has been doing this, right? There's a real problem with conferences, particularly in the technology space, that white male conference organizers put white male guys on stage. And our organizers here, and bless them for it, have been pretty good about going after that instead of saying we can mix that up a little bit. Similarly, colleges and universities do this all the time. They know that students are going to seek out people who are similar to them. So they use the housing system to match you up with someone who's dissimilar to you in one fashion or another in your freshman year in the hopes of giving you a certain amount of cognitive diversity. But we suck at doing this on the web. What we have focused on is giving people exactly what we want. And we do this because we like selling ads. We like making people comfortable. And if you are comfortable and happy with what you're getting, you're going to end up within this bubble of homophily. And whether you call it a filter bubble or an echo chamber, these are all ways of saying the same thing. Given our own choices, we're going to end up with the same people and the same ideas again and again. And we're doubling down on this. As we start moving into social search, there's a lot of things to worry about. I think it's a great idea to worry that it's really creepy, and I think that's a really good point, that you can do things with Facebook search that I'm not comfortable with. But I would also point out that what Facebook search is really trying to do is give you the perspectives of people who you already know, who you're already familiar with. Now, this can be great. If you've got a really complicated social network on Facebook, you can get incredibly unexpected recommendations. But most of us end up in a trap where we're hearing from the same people again and again, and we're reinforcing those opinions. Here's why I care about this. I care about this from social justice reasons, but I really care about this because I think it's making us dumb and I think it's making us uncreative. There's a great thinker at the University of Chicago, Ronald Burt, who makes this case that cognitive diversity is one of the most important things we can look for. And he sees within corporations just people who are in different departments, people who are able to bridge between different parts of the same organization, are at, as he puts it, high risk of having good ideas. And the reason for this is that creativity is an import-export business. Some of the best ideas are ideas that are really obvious in another culture, but you bring them across a line and they're a completely unexpected discovery. And for all of us, we have the potential of being better and more creative thinkers and problem solvers if we can find ways to get better at increasing our own cognitive diversity and overcoming homophily. So this stuff doesn't have to be inevitable. I know, particularly on a day like today, there's this sense that when something becomes technologically possible, that it's just not possible to put it back in the bag. And I had a really helpful conversation with a German friend earlier today who pointed out that, Google Glass probably isn't going to fly in Germany because Germany has actually been very aggressive about trying to protect people's privacy. And I mention this because if we decide that we don't like how our tools are giving us a view of the world, we have the ability to change them, either by trying to figure out how we regulate them, or probably, in the case of the issues that I care about, building better tools so that we have a better way of encountering the whole breadth and creativity of what's out there on the internet. Now, my first attempt at this was to go after the supply side of the problem. With a project like Global Voices, we were really interested in sort of saying, look, we know great stuff is happening out there all over the world. What if we just show it to you? And while this community has done a lot of amazing things, we've ultimately bumped into the same barrier again and again and again. If you're a Kenyan, you come to Global Voices and read about Kenya. And if you're an American, you probably aren't reading the site unless it happens to affect issues that you already feel like you have a direct connection to. So I'm starting to work on this from a different perspective. Now, I'm putting a Fitbit up here. It's pretty clear that unlike one of our earlier speakers, it hasn't done much for my weight, but I'm not actually interested in the physiological part of personal tracking. I'm interested in cognitive personal tracking. I'm really interested in this question of what are we putting into our heads? Can we take a close look at that? Can we ask ourselves hard questions about what we're seeing and what we're not seeing? And would we start making decisions to change our behavior based on this? This is a project, and actually he's asked me to put it under, as he calls it, Friend DA. This is Follow Bias. This is a project from my student Nathan Matthias, who's just done a master's thesis looking at gender in media. So he looks at gender of who's writing for newspapers and how things get retweeted and how often women are quoted as sources. And at the end of the day, he said, you know, I can use these same tools to look at who you pay attention to on Twitter. And so he put together this tool, I put my name into it, and I got a lousy result out of it. And he challenged me to start using this slide in my slide deck so I can show you my own personal gender problems. I am following many more men than women, which I was totally unaware of. I'm following about 1,100 people until someone gave me a visualization where I could sort of say, hey, it looks like I have a blind spot there. It was very hard for me to reflect on it. And so now I discover that my behavior is changing quite a bit. I've been systematically adding some of the brilliant women speakers who have been here on the stage. I've been ignoring the men. We're just trying to sort of correct for the balance here. But we can build tools that make it possible to reflect on what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. And if we make that choice, we can try to interact with the internet in different ways. But we've got to look at where media is looking as well. This is a work by my student Catherine D'Ignazio, who's been asking the question, what do newspapers pay attention to? And so she's been graphing stories per capita, and this is the Boston Globe. And it turns out that the Boston Globe is very good at covering city government. It's very good at covering state government. It's really good at covering some of these wealthy suburbs on the outskirts of town. It doesn't do as well in covering the poor communities of color that are immediately in the center of the city. And what's even crazier about it is that when you start looking at the language that gets used in some of these cities, it's usually not the dialogue about Boston and creativity and innovation, it's a dialogue about crime and criminal justice. And when we start finding ways to interrogate the media we're seeing, we can ask ourselves some hard questions about, are we getting what we want? Are we getting what we need? Where we're starting to go on all of this is to try to design tools that can help us find unfamiliar voices. Right now, if you're using Twitter, Twitter does a great job of recommending people to you who you should be following because all your friends are following them. And that's great, but it's another way of reinforcing this pack mentality that we're all suffering from. We would really love to push this in a different direction and essentially say, look, based on who you're following, based on what you're tweeting, here are some people who view the world a little differently from you, maybe very differently from you. Maybe you get a slider and you get to choose how far out of your comfort zone you want to go. The point on all of these things is that they're thought experiments, but they're also practical experiments. They're a way that we can take on this question. If we don't like what sort of information we're getting and not getting about the world at this point, we have the opportunity to try to rewire some of the tools that we've built and to try to make an internet that gives us as wide a world as possible. I've just finished a book on the topic. I'm going to be signing it later today. Feel free to come by if you want. If you don't want to talk about my book, come talk to Biella Coleman about her brilliant new book. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's great to be with you.